Welcome to my podcast. I'm sitting once more in the conference room behind the stables in the castle courtyard because it's rather blustery and wintry outside, actually. And I'm sitting here with Mike Withers, who has various aspects to his life, from helping his wife, Pat, paint. But at the centre of his life, and the one thing we're going to talk about today, are bees and the role they play in his life and their incredible importance to all of us who live here on this planet. So Mike, thank you so much for joining me today. And of course, it was a little bit earlier that Pat and I chatted outside in the lovely sunshine, and now it's turning towards the autumn time of year and we're in the conference room. But thank you so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome, lady.
And of course, you've got various roles, and one of them is actually to aid and abet the boss, Pat, your wife, with painting. And fun enough, the room that we're sitting in, I imagine you also helped her paint. Is that so?
Yes, and Richard.
And Richard, absolutely. Yes. It is the most lovely, warm, buttery hay colour. And I suppose it's what was the old hayloft, and perhaps also where some of the grooms might have stayed. So it's a little bit different today, isn't it?
It most certainly is, yes. It's a lovely room, though.
And it's beautiful oak beams above us. But I suppose the one thing I wanted to ask you about today is bees. And I'm sitting holding in my hand a really marvellous certificate which recognises 50 years of beekeeping. And it's the British Beekeepers Association awards the certificate to Mike Withers in recognition of 50 years devoted to bees and beekeeping. So that's a wonderful accolade, but that's actually now 10 years ago. So you're going strong. So I'm looking for the 100 years of beekeeping, Mike. Can I ask you, what first got you into beekeeping? What piqued your interest?
Possibly the fact that where my mum used to work for an old doctor and his sister, they kept bees, and they kept them in a corner part of the garden, which was a shed adjoining, which was all tumbling down. And I used to get in there and watch them. It was absolutely wonderful to watch those bees going in with their pockets full of pollen, and it really got me interesting. Then, going to Andover Secondary Boys' School, we did a project on bees, and that did it. I've got to have bees. I must have bees. And there was a schoolmaster he didn't actually teach me, but he was at the village school at Hurstbourne, and he kept 50 stocks of bees on the side of Hurstbourne Tarrant Hill. I've got a photograph somewhere of his bees in the field. He was packing up, and so he heard I was interested in bees, and he gave me my first colony of bees.
How amazing, Mike.
Yeah, it was really wonderful.
So can I ask, how old were you then?
I was about 16.
In a colony of bees, how many bees would be in that colony, Mike?
Well, it varies, but I would think a decent colony of bees, you've got 20,000 bees in there.
20,000 bees?
A decent colony.
And then you've got the queen bee in the middle.
Yeah.
And how long would the queen bee live for?
We tend to requeen after about 3 years because they start getting too old then. But some queens actually break down because queen bees lay 2,000 or roughly 2,000 eggs a day. And that's an awful lot of eggs.
I'm completely speechless. That is an awful lot of eggs.
Yeah.
And they do that throughout the summer, not through the winter, presumably?
No, not that amount through the winter. They just keep themselves going in the winter.
So would they start that process in the spring, in sort of April or May or something?
Gradually, you would think around about, I'm going to say end of May, June, is the peak when they get the most bees they can get for the summer. But now that the honey season is so different because we've now got oilseed rape, which is a very early crop, and that does yield. It used to be that the honey flow was from a second week in July to the last of August, 6 weeks of honey flow is all we get. They get 8 months in New Zealand. We get about 6 weeks.
Wow.
So it has extended a bit with the fact that we get oilseed rape now, which starts, some of it starts blooming in the end of March.
Although I think we haven't been able to grow much this year, actually, here at Highclere, because there's been problems with pests. So the best thing is, because we don't use many chemicals here, as you know, so it's just better to rotate and leave it and not grow it at all for some time. So I suppose this year there's been amazing lime blossom on the lime trees,
and they've yielded. It has yielded, definitely,
which is fantastic. And then I know that I'm always told I should be planting blue-coloured flowers later on for the season, because I think there's something about blue flowers flower later, perhaps. I'm not really sure, but there's quite a few, buddleias obviously, and other flowers like that running later in the season.
They do like buddleia. They always say buddleia for butterflies, but I have seen bees working the buddleia this year. And of course you've got borage.
Yes.
Which is a great one. And Felicia, they call it. Felicia?
Yes, and because actually,
that's a
you're
new
right.
crop now. Yes,
it is. And the other thing is that I've realised that Simon has planted fields of oxeye daisies, because we've harvested the seed, and fields of cornflowers. So I hope your bees really enjoyed those this summer.
They do. I wonder where they were getting it from, because we're still taking honey off. This is some I've taken off recently.
Well, I think one of the last fields of wild flower meadows has now been cropped. There may be one more yet to come. I can't quite remember what Simon was telling me, Simon being our farm manager. And there's wildflower borders now. There always have been around many of the fields, but it's interesting. We are actually in some ways going back, Mike, to the earlier rotation, longer rotations of pre the Second World War, if you like. And I was reading in some medieval documents, which, as you know, I'm potty about.
History,
there were some records of the crops they were growing and all the different trees they were planting.
Yes.
And we've obviously, George and I have planted a little orchard by the field house where we live part of the year. But I was reading how Bishop William of Wickham had planted 61 pears and apple trees and quinces and crab apples. It was absolutely fascinating, and hives and bees were so important. I mean, throughout all of our history. Yes. That's right, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, most of the big houses now have got their own bees. This place has always had bees, because Jack Day had bees.
Oh, did he?
Yes, Jack Day had bees down the bottom of your garden.
Did he? Well, that's why we've got such a good garden, clearly. How lovely. I can't remember, you were telling me, what is it they say? We can't survive without bees and pollinators, can we?
No, they said that within 4 years, the humans will be dead without pollinators.
And that's what bees are. And I think never have more people lived in towns compared to the country. And I think you therefore learn less about country law, as in LORE, rather than the law of the land. Yeah. But it is important, because if you don't have that connection to nature and the diversity of nature, you don't have the connection to the diversity of food how you eat and build all up, which is so, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, you mustn't say this about towns, because let's face it, the biggest one is London, the biggest city, and there's surprising how many hives of bees there is in London. Top of Harrods. And
really?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Well, that is fantastic.
Yeah, they have them on the roofs. Yeah.
That is fantastic. I think it's just the life in London. You're less aware of it, rather than I think there are some great people keeping hives. And is there a sort of Hampshire beekeeping association that you're part of as well?
Yes, definitely.
So there's regional ones and then the national one. Yeah. Would that be correct?
I'm in the Andover Beekeepers, which is connected with Hampshire Beekeepers.
Right.
And I'm in Newbury, which is Berkshire.
Oh, excellent.
So I'm connected with the
everybody. With everybody.
Yeah.
Whenever, if I'm not feeling so great, I tend to turn to thinking about what I'm eating in order to try to improve my immune system. And I was reading in the papers the other day that they were just talking about the wonders of honey.
Yeah.
I mean, have you been aware of that as well, Mike?
I've been told that it does help with this terrible COVID.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I suppose it's an antiseptic and
Yes,
it's
it is
anti-inflammatory.
very, very good for anyone, with any breathing problems. That is very good. If you get a heavy cold on your chest, honey is good
Honey
for
is the
you.
answer.
Yeah.
Well, I think my husband, I'm afraid, mixes it with a bit of whiskey. And I gather Pat does as well, does she, your wife? Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah.
They're in good company.
Yeah.
But
it spoils the honey.
Well, I sort of think the honey is amazing, and
Yeah.
and sometimes I tend to mix it in some yogurt most evenings, and it's
Good for you.
it's my pudding.
A lot of people use it instead of sugar on
Well,
the
I don't
cereals
use
and
sugar,
stuff like
yes.
that. You see.
I think I use it instead of I don't have any sugar if I can. I tend to turn to honey and have that on my porridge or with some blueberries.
Yeah.
You're kind of away, aren't you? And I read in the old days that you also used to put honey on a wound. It's supposed to, in the, again, medieval times, back to my old country law, that...
But the one they use mostly now is the New Zealand one, Manuka honey. Very expensive. I mean, that's about £31 for a jar like that. There must be something very, very good in this Manuka honey. I mean, I'd love to charge £31.
And sometimes the honey is cloudier and sometimes it's clearer. And sometimes it's set. So can you explain to me the difference between the honeys?
That's why I've brought those two, my lady.
Excellent. I've got 2 jars of honey in front of me.
Yeah, that one, as I say, they've been bottled recently. This one was probably one of the last.
The clearer jar of honey.
And that's still clear. But that is now turning granular. That's how it will gradually go down till it goes down to white.
Oh, so that's just a process of time?
That's the process, yeah.
Fine. And yours are always from the same hives, and I suppose the taste depends on what the bees have
the bees work on,
feeding
yes.
and collecting.
Yes.
Do you have a favourite?
I think the best one of all is white clover. That's if you can get it. But no, I do like the normal one round here, the lime.
Yeah.
Get a nice mixture of lime, you've got a real good one. But the most horrible honey is ivy. That's a very horrible honey. And rape honey, just sweet. There's no taste to it much. But get yourself a bucket full of ivy honey and a bucket full of rape. Mix them together and you've got a wonderful honey.
Oh, how interesting.
Because one helps the other.
How interesting.
Yeah.
My father used to like heather honey, so I always remember he used to... I don't know why he used to like that, but that's, I think, because his childhood in Scotland
Yes,
made him
probably.
really like it.
Yeah. Heather honey is an acquired taste. Heather honey would never look like that. It's always, what they call it, sort of globular.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. You cannot extract honey like we extract that, not heather honey. It has to be pressed.
They probably charge me more for buying it, don't they? But I was wondering how often, when the bees are producing honey and the honeycombs, how often can you go and collect it from them, Mike?
I've known a good stock of bees fill a crate in a fortnight and ripen it. You know, they probably fill it in a week, but then they've got to ripen it and cap it.
Right.
And it probably, in a good season, you could get a crate in a fortnight.
Goodness
quite
me.
Easily.
Goodness
and that
me.
would be, a crate is £30 roughly in a crate.
And then at the end of the season, then do you begin to leave their last stocks of honey with them for feeding over the winter?
Yes, we try to keep, if we can, something around about £30 with them.
Right.
And then we put candy on the top. So that if they run out, they come up to the top and they've got nothing, come in from the candy.
Will all the worker bees at that point, will they all just stay quiet in the hive? How long do they live for?
Well, the worker bees, there might be a few die through the winter, but otherwise than that, they don't want to lose too many in the winter because they must keep the warmth.
Right.
Because in the winter, the queen stays in the middle and the bees are moving in and out like that to keep the temperature the same in the middle. And the outer ones coming in for a warm. And that's how they're doing that all the time.
What is the worst sort of weather? Incessant rain? I presume snow, in a sense, can probably insulate them. Or
well, snow can insulate, and snow doesn't really do them any harm. But incessant rain, if they get dampness is the worst thing for killing them.
Well, I think it's like us, isn't it?
Yes, dampness, yeah.
We can lose our spirits and enthusiasm
Definitely.
if it's too damp. My goodness me. And so a worker bee will live again 2 or 3 years, or how does that work?
No. A worker bee in the summer only lives 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
That's why the queen's got to lay 2,000 eggs a day.
Wow. So the last set of worker bees to be born are the ones who then overwinter.
They've got to survive the winter.
And does the queen know to regulate? And is there as the season goes on, is there something within her own makeup, or I suppose intuition or knowledge, that the last set of worker bees have something different which allows them to overwinter? Or how do they survive the winter if the others are dying on a much shorter cycle?
A worker bee, from egg to bee, a queen is 14, 15 days. A worker bee is 21, and a male bee, the drone, is 28. So this is how they regulate all the time. The worker bee, as soon as it's born, doesn't go out and fly. It does all the hive work. Feed the young, clean the hive, all that for its first 3 weeks. And then its next 3 weeks, he's got to go out foraging. And his wings gets all tattered with wear. Thousands of miles they fly. And then they're worn out and they die. But in the winter, they can't get out and fly, so they don't get worn out.
So they stay intact.
So they stay, and that's when they eat their honey then.
And then they start again as the weather warms up.
That's right, yeah.
And then they start going out and the cycle begins again.
Yeah.
How extraordinary. And when a queen bee dies and you need to get a new one, where does the queen bee come from?
Well, I get mine now from a dealer in Andover, and I think most of her bees are now coming from Romania.
Good Lord.
But the bees that they're using is called a buckfast queen. And they were done by Brother Adam at the Buckfast. But they're bred in Romania, and I've heard say, because I bought three lots this year, and all 3 swarmed. No, yeah, all 3, because Heather's swarmed, and my other 2 swarmed. And they had all their queen cells along the bottom of the frame, and that's where they shouldn't be. They should be about 3 parts of the way up, nice long cells, and that's what they call, a good queen.
Yes.
These are what they call swarming queens, and apparently Romania are now breeding queens to sell. So they're breeding them as fast as they can. So they're like swarming queens. So they're not so good. But Brother Adam's buckfast queens were beautiful, and they're so quiet to handle.
So, Mike, you've mentioned Brother Adam at Buckfast Abbey, which is in Devon, to the southwest of where we are today. So could you tell me a little bit about him?
Yeah, Brother Adam was one of the monks at Buckfast, and he was very much into breeding bees to the strain that he wanted. And he was going out to Austria and places like that, getting bees off the mountainside and bringing them back and crossbreeding these bees till he got the actual one he wanted, which is now called the Buckfast Queen. And they are bred as a Buckfast Queen.
Can you still get them today?
Yes.
You can?
Yes, you can get them today. As I say, they're born out in Germany and Romania. Last year I had a German Buckfast, and I found that they're a lovely bee, and they really do work, and they're so quiet you hardly get stung with those. The Romanian Buckfast, I'm not so sure of. I'll tell you next year on those, because I've only just got them this year, and they swarmed a lot.
Right.
So we don't want that.
Well, perhaps I can contribute to helping you get a couple more German Buckfast bees, if they're good ones. It'd be lovely.
Yeah,
I'd like to do something to, from Highclere as a small thank you anyway. So that would be fantastic. And George and I would love to do that.
There is a New Zealand queen They're very, very large, very, very light in colour, and they really do produce bees, and they really are quiet. But the trouble is, they don't half eat. So, Malcolm, my cousin, he had one. He was so pleased with it because they're so nice to handle. He lost them in the winter. They ate all their food. He just couldn't keep up with them. This buckfast is a good working bee. It's not a greedy bee.
Right.
So that's why it is.
And they're not bred in this country anymore, Mike?
Yes, Jed Marshall breeds a buckfast queen in this country. But he wants about £46 for a queen.
Right.
You could put that queen into a hive and they kill it.
Yes.
£46 down the pan.
Yes.
You've got to be just right.
Well, it's all this delicate balance.
It's the balance, yeah. You've got to get it right. This year I had one little stock of bees. I kept putting queen cells in, and they were just killing it off, and they had no queen. And then all of a sudden, they've turned up with a queen. Don't know how they got it, but they've got one.
They clearly wanted their own and were not interested in yours.
Yeah.
Is it difficult to breed a queen?
I've bred one. I keep saying I'm going to try it. I do it, sort of partly, what shall we say, normal. You look through the hive and, oh yeah, there's a lovely queen cell. Take your old queen away and the bees think they've swarmed because the old queen's gone. And let the young queen hatch and it's all done. But if you don't take it away, that old queen will say, oh, they want a new queen there. They off I'm gone and they swarm.
Right.
So, it's trial and error all the time. But what they tend to do now is they'd get a brood frame and they'd cut the wax like that in sort of V, and they'll hang these queen cells off. And then when they've got a grub in there hatching,
yes,
they cut that away and they put it in a hair curler,
yes,
and let the other bees feed it, and the queen will come out in there. Because if two queens meet, they fight till death.
yes.
So you've got to keep them apart. This is the difficult thing with queen rearing. You've got to keep them apart, otherwise they fight. But
in the old days, before man was involved, how did the bees produce a queen, or did one queen die so another one naturally hatched?
You can do that. If you think the queen's had it, she's not doing it. You can kill her, and they will take an egg from a cell up to 4 days old and put into a queen cell, which hangs down rather than in. It hangs down, and then they feed it raw jelly.
How extraordinary!
And then she comes out as a queen.
They are the most extraordinary insects, aren't they? Quite extraordinary, and so important to our fruit business, to our life here on Earth. And somehow in their routines and their knowledge, I think they know. Golly, they are completely mind-blowing. And so at the moment, Mike, this autumn, the bees are still collecting honey. Will you be able to get a little bit more honey out? Yes,
we're hoping to get a little bit more. We won't get a lot more. Some of them are shut down and given them their varroa treatment, because as you know now, there's a mite in bees that kills them, varroa mite, and we have to treat for that.
I think in some ways, Mike, this extraordinary and challenging spring and summer that we've been through has been interesting, and in terms of people's realisation perhaps that we've been offered a reset button, we've been offered some silence and the sound of silence.
Sound of silence, and, lovely song.
We've done less mowing, we've had more bee orchids in the wildflower meadow.
Yes.
I've never seen so many. It's been really exciting, and the diversity within the wildflower meadow has never seemed greater. I mean, I hope I looked already, but looking this year, it seems ever more present.
Yes.
And I think there is more growth coming in some of the wild thyme, which is also important now as the wildflower meadow falls over actually, and it's going into the autumn time. But I just hope that we can all perhaps do a little less consume a little less of processed goods and enjoy
less
life
spray.
a little bit more. Yeah.
This was what was doing it, and I looked at grass verges and that on the roadsides. There was so much spray used. The wildflowers were disappearing, but now they're not using the spray. They can't use the spray, so we're getting a lot more wildflowers now.
Good.
And
Well, that's very positive.
It's a good thing. Yeah,
it is a
really
good thing,
is.
isn't it? I hope the bees and the hives will begin to flourish a little bit more in future years.
I think they will. I mean, I've got 16 lots now, so I think I'm right in saying I've got 18 buckets of honey still to bottle.
My goodness, that's pretty amazing. And actually, when there were some visitors here, it must have been last year now, do you remember there was a hive had swarmed and was in a tree on the south lawns in front of the castle? And he was a major attraction. Everybody stood quite a way back, and there you were dressed up in all your bee gear.
And I had to go and have my photograph taken with two of the young ladies from America.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I remember that as well. That was fun. And
was.
You know, catching them with the skep and watching you do all that was completely riveting. I think young Richard might have been there helping him. I can't remember now.
Campbell.
Oh, was it Campbell? Campbell was there helping you.
And he didn't get stung. That's from that. I did.
Did you?
Quite a few times, yeah. And this year they've been worse than ever.
Have they?
Oh, they're vicious.
But they don't, I mean, I don't know, do bees recognise what you're doing, or the beekeepers, or what is that that prompts them to
sometimes
sting?
I think they do. Sometimes they really go for you, then all of a sudden they calm down. They're attracted to scent, and they can smell. They can smell if you're frightened, then they'll go for you. If you're frightened, you tend to perspire, and they pick that up, and then they get quite nasty. Providing you can stay calm, they're all right. Yeah, they really are. They're really interesting things.
When you collected all the bees in the skep with all the visitors around you last summer, where do you take the skep next, Mike?
Well, we put it into a nucleus box. I think probably, if you remember, there was a nucleus box on the ground, a grey polystyrene nucleus box. You can get various sizes. That was actually a 6-frame one. We put them in that and let them, when they started breeding and they fill it out, we put it into a hive then, which is 11 frames. So then they fill that up.
So you go from cottage to castle.
That's right. Cottage to castle. That's correct. Yes. Oh. Very good. I've known so many people. Dave Lockhart, he was quite interesting. He's got his own hive now.
Has he? That is lovely. Yeah. And he's got one of my dogs. So there we go. He's
what
a very
lovely
good man.
dog that is too.
She's called Abby. So after Downton Abbey.
Lovely.
She's very sweet. She really is.
Yeah.
I think she's been such success and given Dave's wife such a lot of love as well.
Yeah.
She's more at home and he's out fixing all our electricity, and there's usually something gone wrong or something that needs replacing, isn't there? But without a doubt.
But you say animals recognise voice. We got a cat. She's now nearly 20. As soon as Pat comes home, she knows Pat's voice and she's there. They're the boss. I'm the young one.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure whether... I mean, Geordie's sort of the boss, isn't he? But he doesn't always know what I'm doing, so it kind of works quite well in that way.
I know that one. That's very true.
Yes, I know you do.
Yeah.
And actually, your wife, Pat, always says to me, well, as we start a project, now, does Lord Carnarvon know about this or not? And it's quite frequently or not.
Or not, yeah.
And I do share most of what my bright ideas are with him, but it's choosing the time and the place to tell your husband, and I think I'm just the same as everybody else. But you have been such an amazing support, and I hope you go on carrying on to be such a wonderful support, dear. Also to Pat in your life here together, and the little cottage that you live in, the other side of the park from us. I always love driving by you, and I look over the hedge to see if you're in or not, or pottering in your garden. It's an amazing garden you have, which doesn't surprise me at all with all your bees.
I had one hive of bees in the garden years ago. I was out there working them, and our neighbour come out in her garden, and she had the bees all after her. So she said, "I've got some in the air." I said, well, go round the front door, Joyce, and I'll come round. She went through the house, she opened the front door and they was waiting for her.
Oh, no.
That's right. So I said, well, we can't have bees in the garden. So that's when we took them out of the garden. But now I've got 4 in the garden.
So if you're stung by a bee, what is the best thing to put on it, Mike?
Well, they always used to say the old blue bag. You can get stuff now from the chemist, you know. I take a tablet every day, and that one stops it.
Oh, how lovely.
Yeah, I don't swallow much at all.
Oh, that's very useful. Very good tip.
Wasps. I got stung with a wasp again the other day. God, that's painful.
Yes.
They're worse. It's a different venom.
It is
It's
very
a different venom to a bee.
Bees give us something which is so beautiful and such a contribution to our life and our food. And I think we're all very good at enjoying our food. And your parties in the summer with Pat are legendary. And I know you haven't been able to have them this year.
No,
but I think we're all going to have to party next year, Mike.
Oh, definitely.
I hope we can all find ourselves winding our way up to your house.
Oh, brilliant.
Next summer for a jolly good party. We'll toast your bees and toast the summer 2021, I think.
We'll have one as soon as this blooming lot's over. I
Excellent.
think that's when we're going to have one. We're going to have a good party.
Excellent. Mike, thank you so much for joining me today. I have, as ever, learnt so much from you and really appreciate all you do.
Yeah.
And bees are a key part of all of our lives on this planet, and they need to carry on as we do with some care.
Yes.
And consideration for others. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much, Lady Carnarvon. Lovely to speak to you.
It's always lovely speaking to you. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast. I don't want you to miss out on the next one, so please do try and press the subscribe button.